Hello and welcome to this video, guys. Today we're going to look into monorepos with NX. We're also going to look into microfrontends, different ways of approaching the microfrontend architecture with Angular. We're also going to look into pros and cons of using microfrontend architecture, and also why using a NX monorepo is a good structure for your organization, and so on. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get started with two different concepts that we're going to look into. So the first thing would be the micro frontend. What is a micro frontend and how should we think about it? So to continue working with this, let's investigate what a micro frontend really is. So looking at this image here, you can see we have different applications or micro applications that is being served at the same time in different frameworks or libraries in a same view, right? So this is something that could be achievable with module federation, for instance. There's a couple of other alternatives as well, but in this video we're going to look into module federation, and we're also only going to focus on Angular applications in this video. So in short, you can deploy each and one of these applications individually. So for instance, the micro app 1 here at the top, micro app 1. So this would probably be the host application, so the React parts, and then within that host applications you would have remote applications. So the remote applications in this case could be, for instance, you have some content, calendar logic being visualized in Angular. You could have a couple of other features in Vue or Svelte. The reason to why you want to have it in this way, where you can have different variants of programming frameworks and libraries, is usually due to teams having different experiences. So I would say that having 4 different frameworks or libraries would be madness in my case, or my opinion. I would say having maybe 2 would be good enough. I mean, React or Angular, I would have them for complete standalone, and differences, I think they might be used in different aspects of development. So for enterprise applications, I would say Angular, the one to go. React would be maybe small to medium-sized applications where you don't have too much logic, where you want to enforce a certain structure, right? So there's when I would use React. But in terms of this video, we're only going to look into the Angular applications. So the next concept we have is a monorepo structure with NX. So what is a monorepo structure? So mono stands for one. And working with different applications in organizations might be that in front end you would have multiple repositories for different applications, which is quite common. But with NX monorepo you would have every single front end project, or essentially backend with Node, with Nest and so on, within the same repository. There's a lot of benefits having them in the same repository. There's also pros and cons with everything, but I would say that the pros outruns the cons in this case. So as you can visualize here, we would have all of these applications within the same GitHub repository and working with the NX monorepo. So let's get started. So in order to get started with this NX monorepo folder structure, we're going to utilize the command that is given by the NX, and also keep in mind that this works for React, Vue, and Angular, so you can pick and choose what you want. You could also place your component library here, which would be generated with, for instance, web components in Stencil.js or Lit.js, to generate components that could be utilized in different frameworks. But today the focus is going to be Angular. So just pasting the npx create nx workspace at latest, so it will generate a complete new workspace for us with the latest configurations. Let's proceed. Would you like to create your workspace? Just press enter, and here you can choose. Do you want to have TypeScript, JS, or what do you want? We're going to choose Angular. Keep in mind, you can also place your backend applications here. So it's not only for front end. This is the benefit of using NX. For instance, if you're working with a Node backend, as you might see here in the bottom of the screen, Node, you can generate Node applications or Nest applications. It could be applications where you run your backend, and you can combine them in an easy way because they live in the same repository. All right, so let's continue. We're generating an Angular application. We're going to create an integrated monorepo. Application name, so let's call it dev by Seb. Host. We're going to use SCSS. We would like to use standalone components, but let's not do that right now. We want to use routing, yes. Either here you can choose if you want to have enabled distributed caching to make your CI faster. This will be connected to the NX cloud. For this case that we have today, I'm going to choose no. So now it's going to install a couple of different packages we have. Let's see here. Let's also make the screen a bit bigger so we can explore the code together. Alright, so this might take a couple of seconds. We'll be right back once this is up and running. So in order for us to get started, we can either click on this link here or just navigate to localhost 4200 in order for us to get started to the application. You can also go to the app component file, just clean this up a bit. We're going to remove the NX welcome component that we received, not interested. So let's just go ahead and remove that real quick. We're also removing it from here as well. All right, so once we have essentially removed that, now it should be up and running. We have the routes here, so if you want to generate a route, we can do it. So if you have installed the NX console, you can just right click and you can go with NX generate. Here you can say I want to generate a module. So schematic/Angular module, it will utilize that to generate it. So we can just say account. So let's see here. We could, let's see here, route, create a routing module. Let's say we want to have sub routes and so on. So let's go ahead and just generate real quick and you'll see what happens. And as you can see here, we have the account module with a routing module, quite similar to the way you would do it with the Angular CLI. This essentially just utilizes the Angular CLI, right? All right, so now we have a module. You can just add the route in which way you want it to be added. So let's say we want to generate a new application instead. You can just go to NX, you can go to generate, and then you would say I want to generate a shell application. So from before, you have the host application, which is essentially the application we created here, the localhost running on localhost 4200, and then we have the shell application that we now are going to generate, and this is going to be a sub application that we place within our application. It could be, for instance, the account module in this case. All right, so let's click on that. We can see what do we want the project to be named at. Let's see here. We can make the screen a bit bigger. We want it. So we need to point which is the related client app, which is essentially the host application that we have. The ID. Let's see here, which is the main server file and so on. All right, so let's generate this and see what happens. So let's open the console. So we need to have a router applet in our root component. So let's go ahead and just add that, and we can just regenerate. So it's super tactile. It will usually give you the exact thing you need to do in order to proceed. So now that we have the router module, it will automatically set up a different kind of structure for us. All right, so if I now open up, let's see what happened. So here we need to generate go to NX generate, and here we're going to select a remote application. So we want to generate a remote application, and here we want to name it, let's call it account. And then we're going to specify which is the host, which is going to be the one we generated before. So continuing, there's a couple of things we can add Tailwind and so on. We're not going to do that. We want Cypress to be the test thing. We're going to use ESLint. And here you can decide, like, if you want to have server-side rendering and so on, which I do not want. We're going to use SCSS. All right, so now that we have everything set up, we can just generate this application now. And it's going to generate a sub application, and here it will give some complaints to us. The selected does not contain a module federation to ensure it has been set up as a host application. And the issue is that we did not really set up a host application as a starter. We just generated a default Angular application. So what we need to do now is essentially we need to generate the host. So we're going to generate the host, and this is going to include the module federation. So we'll call it host. Just call it host for now. It doesn't really matter. We can, at the same time we're generating it in this way, we could probably, let's see here, let's just generate it. Let's make sure we have all of the configurations you want it to have, CSS and so on. So generate it. All right, so it will generate a new application. Obviously we need to remove the old one because because it requires the module federation config. This is the file I was missing before, so this is the file in which it asks for. So, and it also has the webpack prod config and webpack config. So let's just go ahead and remove these two applications that obviously we need to stop this. We can we're going to delete them. We're just going to ignore them. We'll generate now a remote application. So generate, search for remote, and here we can specify our host, and this is going to be, let's call it account remote. The name standards obviously should follow whatever you have in your organization. Maybe it would just be account module and so on. This is something you would have to decide with the architects and so on. All right, so now that we have generated the remote application, we should have one remote application and one host application, right? So, and you will see here that the remotes DTS is just typing for the remotes module. You will not be able to remove this. If you remove this, it won't work as you want it. Looking into the module federation config file, you'll see that account remote application is part of the remote application. You'd also see that, if you go to the webpack config file, we have pointing towards the module federation config file. So this is why it's required. And also, if you want to have some other webpack configurations, you could add them here to the prod config.js file. We're not going to look into that. So now that we have a host and a remote application. So what we want to do is essentially see how can we load in one application from the other application, right? So we'll just serve it. We're going to serve the host application. The reason to why you want to serve the host applications is because this one should spin up all of the remote applications as well. And as you can see here, it spins up the account build for development, and it also will serve the host application that you have as well. So allowing it a couple of seconds, you will be able to just navigate to, let's see here, I think 4200, see what will happen. Let's see. So it will set up a server for you, and you can see home and account remote. So it already has set up a route for you, which is quite awesome, because then there's a lot of boilerplate code you don't need to read. So if you go to app routes, keep in mind we want to go to the hosts source app, not the account remote. And here you can see how it actually loads the children in a similar way you would load lazy load feature module, right? So this is quite awesome because now you already have a connection between the host and the remote application. So for instance, when we jump here, it goes from the host to the remote. And let's jump into the NX component here and just remove all of this crap and just add router outlet. And then, nothing should be added there. I just reckoned hello world. Just print hello world here instead. So we'd go home and you would have your application here. So this would be in a similar way. So if you would want to have any logic on the app route for the host application, you would just place it in a similar routing way as you would do in a regular Angular application. We do not want that. We want it straight to jump onto the remote module because we do not have anything, or we don't have really anything placed within the app component for now. So if I go to the app component, imagine we would have a menu here, right? So this is the menu, as you can see. And what happens is that it actually loads the remote applications from the router outlet. So this would be in a similar way as you would be used to working with the regular Angular application. So if I now would go to the other applications that I have, you would see that I can go to the, if I go to the, here's the remote entry. So keep in mind, it always points towards a certain module, right? So the entry module, remote entry module in this case. And you can change the name of it. You can do whatever you want with it. You can point towards another feature and so on. But we're not going to look into that too much. So let's just clean up all of this code that comes from NX. We're not really interested in it. My remote application. So if I save this now, jumping between home and the remote application, it should give us a couple of different things. And as you can see here, it does not really reload the sub applications because we decided to run it from the app component TS file. So let's see here, compile successful. It doesn't really recompile the sub features that you have, so you would have to set up a different way of working with it. Usually the way you would work with a sub application is that you would just go serve account, and then you would just serve your account remote application to do the changes there. This means that standalone teams can work on different features at the same time without having to think of destroying other applications. Obviously, you can destroy the host applications by adding strange logic, but now we can go to 4201 and we can continue to actually implement the logic we want to have on the remote application. So this, my friends, is one way of actually working with micro frontends. So you might think, how is this beneficial? Why would I really have the micro frontend architecture? And I would say, if you do not think you need it, then you obviously don't need it, right? Do not make things overcomplicated for no reason. You would only need to have micro frontends if you have a super large enterprise application where you have multiple teams working on sub features without having to like ruin anything in between the applications. So for instance, if I work on the account module and someone works on a complete separate feature, we want to be able to deliver our feature without having to wait for things in other applications. So with this said, you can have complete standalone teams working on features together, but also keep in mind that working with micro frontends and model federation also allows you to work with different frameworks. For instance, my remote application in this application could, for instance, be set up with React. It does not really need to be an Angular application. So there's actually different ways you can utilize the micro frontends to have different teams working in different stacks and so on. We're not going to explore this as for now. I just want to show one last thing on how you could work with libraries. So NX enforces something they call a mental model. The idea is that you usually create libraries and you do not put so much logic within the actual applications, which makes total sense when you work with it for some time. In the beginning, you might be a bit confused, but let's look into a library. So let's say we want to create a shared button component that would be used in the different applications. So both in the remote application and the host application. So generate it. So let's call it button. We're not going to think about any directory. We're not going to think about anything else like that. We're just going to make it quite simple, and you guys decide on how your organization would need it to be done. So let's go ahead and create it with SCSS. So now when I generate it, it will generate a library which will consist of the it will not consist of anything as for now, but we need to create some data. So if we just close the apps folder, there's also a libs folder, and as you can see here, it has generated one library for us, and now we can generate within the lib here, we can generate a component. We could have it standalone, but we do not want it to be just for this purpose, to just simulate how it would work. Now we can generate a component within the library. So we're going to generate the button component, which is going to be utilized in both the host and remote application. So one thing to keep in mind is that you need to export it from the barrel function, the barrel file. Otherwise, you might have some problems in your applications. So what do we want to do? We are going to look into a couple of different things. All right, so if you now go to the tsconfig base file, you should see that the button or the library that we just generated should have some sort of a path set up for us. So if we want to import the button module, we would import it in this way. Or if we wanted to import the button component, we would import it from here. So for now, we have a similar way of working with Angular. So you have imports, declaration, exports, just a module, right? And in the button, let's just go ahead and do it real simple and ugly, right? We're going to transclude whatever we have. We're going to have a button. We can just add a style to it. Let's make the button black. And keep in mind, this is just exactly the same on how you would use a component in Angular otherwise. So let's see here. We generate a button, black, white color, and 0 border. Let's add some padding. So we'll go ahead and say padding top bottom 4px, 20px to the sides. Now that we have the button component, we can make sure that we import it, right? So we go back to our application, and currently we are essentially serving the micro front end. Let's see here. We will shrink the screen a bit. So we have my remote application. We're serving it for now. So what can we do? We can save it, go to the HTML. We can close all of the files. Let's make sure that you can see the name of the files as well. That might make total sense. So now we need to navigate to the account remote module. Let's go to the app module there. We are going to import the button module. And as you can see, it is being imported from org/button. This comes from the tsconfig base file. You can change it to whatever you want it to be. Usually it would be your organization and then the name of the library. All right, so now that we have imported it, we could essentially go to the NX welcome component, and we can say, let's see, org button. Org button. Let's see here, what did we name it? It's going to be org button. Did we make sure that it was imported in the correct module? Sorry, it needs to be imported in the entry module, obviously, because that's where it is, or essentially the next component lives. So now that we imported it, the button should be here. We can say my button. So saving this, we should have the button to the right. And as you can see, now we have one button being served on the remote application. And now if I go to the button, you should be able to see live updates. So just imagine if you have hundreds of projects, maybe you would not have that many, but if you would have a complete set of applications that you have, and you want to make some changes to a common component, that would be a complete mess, right? But utilizing the microfrontend architecture, you can implement some smart CI/CD, essentially testing all of the different places where the applications are being used. So this is something that NX already has built in. So you would have the affected, and here you can say, I want to run all of the affected projects that has been impacted by this change, and I want to run the lints, or I want to run the end-to-end test for it, and so on. Just imagine what would happen now. We only have this button within the remote application, which would trigger the remote application to be tested and so on in the CI/CD pipeline. But let's take a step back. We have utilized it in one application. Now we want to utilize it in the host application as well. So what we need to do there is quite similar. We import the button module here as well. And after importing the button module, let's see here. Let's see, app component. And here we can just say, I want to add the org button, right? So my host button. So as I'm not really running the host application, we can run the host application at the same time in test mode, and you can do that by actually going to serve host, and it will execute it in this way. And let's just go ahead and close the other applications that we have running. Let's see here. It's essentially going to run both of them, and we should have two different buttons being previewed, and then we know for a fact that we have something reusable. Right, so give it a couple of seconds. Maybe we need to navigate to 4,200. in order for us to actually hit the host application. And then we have my host button, and then we have my button, which actually comes from the account remote module. Alright guys, now that we have demonstrated on how it works with NX monorepos and module federation, we can conclude a couple of things. It's quite easy to set this up with NX and module federation, but there's also a couple of other pros and cons of actually utilizing NX monorepos, and that's something I've written a bit about in my blog post. So understanding micro-frontend architecture benefits and challenges. I'm going to drop that link in the comments or in the description of this video. Please have a look. Give me your take on it. I would appreciate any positive or negative feedback. Thank you guys for watching. All of the best. Bye.